During the production of The Empire Strikes Back, George Lucas and concept artist Joe Johnston worked together to create a super commando soldier. This elite trooper was designed very close to what would become Boba Fett, except their armor was all white with some black accents to match that of the Imperial Stormtrooper. The elaborate and awesome design was deemed too expensive to mass produce for the movie, but a prototype was made. This was to be used for a single character rather than an army. It was painted in a way that would differentiate from the existing Imperial costumes of white or black. It was given muted colors, which also suggested some moral ambiguity. With the character of Boba Fett being included in the movie, the word Mandalorian still didn't exist. Joe Johnston never recalled hearing it during the entire production, but assumes that George Lucas is the one that came up with it at some point. This comes from an article on StarWars.com. I try to be very careful about attributing things or putting words into George Lucas's mouth, which is all too prevalent on the internet. Fans loved the design and mystery of this new character. Promotional materials and extra stories before the expanded universe was really established started filling in his backstory. The earliest I could find was a 1979 article from the Bantha Tracks fan club that described him as wearing the armor of Imperial shock troopers that were warriors from the Clone Wars who the Jedi wiped out. Even the Empire Strikes Back novelization that was based on a late draft of the script refers to Boba Fett's armor as once belonging to a group of evil warriors defeated by the Jedi in the Clone Wars. Some elements would remain when Boba Fett would be called Mandalorian, the elite warrior aspects of these early rumors of his backstory. 1983 was the first big push for Mandalorians into Star Wars lore. Marvel Comics Star Wars number 68 is the first mention by any account that I could find of Mandalorians. This issue also introduced Fen Shaisa and Tabi Dalla, who were Mandalorian commandos under Boba Fett during the Clone Wars. This same issue also used the term Mandalorian protectors and depicted a good chunk of their armor and early history. It did a lot to build the lore around these people. The 80s into the 90s saw a lot more growth in Star Wars lore. The West End Games source books were the primary source for fans of this era and have been hugely influential on this channel, giving us a lot of lore. There were some tidbits given for Mandalorians, but the next truly significant contribution to the lore would have to wait until 2002's Attack of the Clones, when George Lucas himself made a major entry by introducing Jango Fett and showing audiences, after a nearly 25-year wait, what the Clone Wars actually were. If you're getting value or entertainment out of any of my transmissions, it would mean a lot if you would join the Remnant and subscribe. With curiosity about the Mandalorians being at an all-time high, Lucasfilm employees actually worked with authors of the expanded universe to flesh out Jango's backstory in the comic book Jango Fett Open Seasons, also released in 2002. This story is now considered Legends, but with nothing to replace it and the fact that it's cool, you should definitely check it out. This influential story introduced Jaster Muriel, the true Mandalorians, Death Watch, and gave us our first look at Mandalore as a world. This is the cornerstone of Mandalorian Expanded Universe stories. A few years later, Karen Traviss would be a major contributor to Mandalorian lore. She wrote the Incredible Republic Commando series and various articles like The History of the Mandalorians for Star Wars Insider magazine. She created Mandoa, their language, Rezol Nair, the 6 actions every Mandalorian must follow, and gave insight to Mandalorian life and foundling adoption practices. Traviss drew inspiration from Earth warrior cultures like the Celts for their clan structure and ethos. Boba, Jango, and the Mandalorians at large received a ton of love from the fans. Some groups even calling themselves Fandalorians. By the late 20-aughts, Mandalorians were prevalent in novels, comics, and video games. Fan-favorite video game series Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2 introduce Canderous Ordo, Mandalore the Preserver, and the Mandalorian Wars. The Star Wars Legacy comic run showed us a glimpse at what the Mandalorians were doing a century after the Return of the Jedi. 2008 saw Mandalorian lore be expanded upon and reinvented in some ways. The incredible Clone Wars animated animated series created by George Lucas and Dave Filoni. It's said that George Lucas has his own vision of what Mandalore was. This led to some contradictions for fans, but the agreement with the expanded universe was always that it was allowed to continue and every attempt was made to keep a strong continuity, but Lucasfilm and George Lucas himself were the final and only official word. The first look at Canon Mandalore depicts it as a mostly human people. Their planet was mostly desolate white sand with biodomed cities throughout. This series introduced Duchess Satine, her pacifist movement, and Death Watch soldiers being the radicals wanting to stick to their warrior roots. It also depicted much of the armor as a uniform rather than the wildly different depictions in the EU. The idea from Lucas and Filoni was to represent the ancient Mandalorians as an organized army, not a loose band of mercenaries. They also intentionally made the Death Watch armor different from Boba Fett's to allow that fan-favorite character to stay unique. The biggest upset in reconciling canon to the EU lore people loved was a 2010 episode of The Clone Wars having Mandalorian Prime Minister Almec say that Jango Fett was not a Mandalorian. The implication was that he was a random bounty hunter who was using Mandalorian armor. Filoni addressed the controversy, saying that Lucas wanted Jango and Boba to be outsiders from the Mandalorian culture, and that Almec's statement was a politically motivated slight to distance Mandalore from Jango Fett's actions. I couldn't find a direct source on Filoni's statement, so I apologize if this is a widespread misquote. Fans would have to wait years for clarity. In The Mandalorian, Din Djarin confronts Boba Fett. Fett is looking for Jango's armor that Din is in possession of. In the armor is a chain code showing that Jango Fett was indeed a foundling and adopted into Mandalorian culture. This is a clever way for both versions to be right. Someone born into the Mandalorian culture may not consider a foundling adopted in as a true Mandalorian, especially if they were political rivals. Unfortunately, at the time of the Clone Wars series, Contradictions Karen Traviss stopped working with the Star Wars franchise over the incompatibilities. Despite a few bumps in the road, the lore of the Mandalorians grew in this series. The Darksaber created by Tar Vizsla was introduced. It was established as a symbol of leadership. The cartoon even brought Mandoa into canon. It also gave us Bo-Katan Kryze, who would have a great future in the franchise. Filoni drew inspiration from Nordic cultures for the aesthetics of the animated Mandalorians. Even with a few lore conflicts, the Clone Wars and later the animated series Rebels increased fan love for the Mandalorian people. Mandalorians went even further into the mainstream when Dave Filoni collaborated with Jon Favreau on a new branch of the Star Wars universe. Favreau had voiced Pre Vizsla, the leader of Death Watch and descendant of the Darksaber creator in animation. Favreau fell in love with the Mandalorian mix of Western and samurai elements. The earliest inspirations for Boba Fett were drawn from spaghetti westerns and Kurosawa films, after all. Favreau pitched a live-action series that would follow a single Mandalorian warrior called simply The Mandalorian. It debuted in 2019 as the first ever Star Wars live-action series. It had major appeal, bolstered a relatively new streaming service, and brought in a legion of new Star Wars fans. Favreau credits Clint Eastwood's The Man with No Name as a major source of inspiration for this successful series. Jon Favreau worked closely with Dave Filoni to make sure that Mandalorian lore was respected. The series grew the lore without contradicting what came before it. This series introduced a zealot group called the Children of the Watch, along with the concept of the Way. The phrase, "this is the way," entered the pop culture lexicon, and even 6 years on, has never left. The Mandalorian also merged the animated world with the live-action Katie Sackhoff, who voiced Bo-Katan Kryze in animation, as she was cast to bring this character to life. Ahsoka Tano was also brought into live action and received a spin-off series. That series further explores Mandalorian culture by bringing another animated character, Sabine Wren, into live action. A major part of the series' success is in the character Grogu, officially called the Child, for an entire first season, but fans dubbed him Baby Yoda. Favreau was even allowed to sacrifice some merchandise money by keeping this new fan-favorite character a secret until the series debut. I'm positive Disney and Lucasfilm have more than made their money back on Grogu gear. The Mandalorian's journey from a single mysterious character in 1980 grew into a rich culture with many elements, offshoots, sects, clans, and houses. It spans two continuities very successfully, allowing fans to choose the one that they prefer. This culture is a testament to the collaborative nature of the Star Wars franchise and how fan interest can encourage a story to grow. Mandalorians are among the most popular elements that keep fans coming back to the Star Wars universe. They stand toe-to-toe with the lore and affection seen for the Jedi and Sith. The Imperial Remnant is recruiting. Grab a channel membership to support the channel and get exclusive benefits, and then check out this video next for more Star Wars lore.